Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. School funding is once again a hot topic across the state. Many districts are facing major budget shortfalls, and legislation pending in Trenton could reshape how our schools are funded. This issue isn't new, but what about their plans to address the topic? Assemblyman Gerry Scharfenberger is standing by to talk all about it. First, though, with election day just weeks away, the race for New Jersey's next governor is neck and neck. Democrat Sherrill and Republican Jack Ciattarelli faced off in their final debate recently, sparring over the opioid crisis, property taxes, and federal funding cuts. Polls show it is one tight race. Former New Jersey legislator John Wisniewski is here now to break it all down. John Wisniewski, welcome. It's so good to see you.
Good to be back, Laura. Thanks.
Well, you know all about Trenton as well as running for governor, having been a candidate for governor. So let's talk a little bit about the race for governor. They had the candidates, Sherrill, Jack Ciattarelli, had their final debate in New Brunswick. And man, not only was it fiery, but it got personal. Sherrill was hammering Jack Ciattarelli on the opioid crisis and also claiming that, he made millions while New Jerseyans died. Ciattarelli was firing back at her record in the Navy. So can you talk a little bit about where we are right now and how personal it's gotten?
Well, political campaigns tend to get personal as you get closer to the finish line. We've seen a variety of polling information that comes out, and there's one poll that is really a Republican-leaning poll that shows Ciattarelli basically tied with Sherrill. Quinnipiac poll, which I think is a gold standard poll, shows Sherrill with a healthy lead. I mean, certainly something that requires her to continue to work, but well ahead of Ciattarelli. And everybody wants to close the deal between now and Election Day and get the attention of voters between now and Election Day. And so that's one way to do it. These debates are, certainly not the Lincoln Douglas debates. These are sound bites that are designed to play to the audience, play to the base, to get voters' attention.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the meat and potatoes of the debate and what, debates and other things are intended to do, and it's informed the electorate. So when it comes to policy, the candidates, they're both talking about the economy. This is New Jersey's top voter concern. So I want to play a soundbite to hear what both Jack Ciattarelli and Sherrill had to say about affordability. Let's listen to that, and then I'll get your reaction.
My opponent has put forth an illegitimate plan that isn't feasible. Even the governor, a member of her own party, has said that, I don't really think you can do that. There are 77 incumbent Democratic legislators, 52 of which are on the ballot this year, and not one has endorsed her plan. To get electricity rates down on day one, I will pull us out of Reggie. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a carbon tax policy that has cost New Jersey $300 to $500 million a year for homeowners, tenants, and businesses, and it's been a failure. Electricity is at its all-time high. The air is no cleaner, and ratepayer dollars are going to other states. So we can provide some relief on day one. We also have to take care of the property tax crisis, something you won't hear my opponent ever talk about. We need a new school funding formula in New Jersey. With a new school funding formula, we can have a more equitable distribution of state aid, and in so doing, reduce the property tax burden with our local school districts. We also have two other things that are driving the affordability crisis in New Jersey. Housing. We need more affordable housing. We just need to be smart about the way we do it. Another thing that's driving the affordability crisis is child care, and I have a specific plan on how to relieve that burden for families with young children.
I constantly hear about this from voters. So that's why on day one, I'm declaring a state of emergency on energy prices, freezing rate hikes. I'm going to take on the PBMs. Those are those middlemen that can drive up drug prices up to 10 times, driving down your health care costs. And I'm going to ensure that I'm taking on those landlords that are colluding to drive up your rental prices. So housing, health care, utility costs, immediately get to work driving down your costs. And quite frankly, we know my opponent won't do it because his number one donor is somebody who's actually under investigation for driving up those rental costs. So I'm going to continue to fight for New Jerseyans, and my opponent just won't.
All right, so let's get your reaction. The issues they're outlining aren't anything new. When you're at a debate, there isn't a lot of time to really go into the nitty-gritty of the plan. So how'd you think each candidate did?
Well, I think each candidate really covered what their talking points, what their messages are. But Laura, in your question to me, you really underscored the difficulty of the debate forum. These questions, the affordability crisis in New Jersey, it's not a one sentence answer. It's probably not even a one paragraph answer. But in a debate format where you're given 30, maybe 60 seconds to respond, you've got to condense so much information that, on a certain level, it doesn't really capture the real issue. And so these debates are opportunities for candidates to make their cases, but they're really not complete. The affordability crisis, look, I was in the legislature for 22 years. When I first ran in 1993 and Jim Florio was running for re-election for governor, it was an affordability crisis back then. I think voters have almost become a little, they expect that this is a difficult problem that's not easily solved.
Yeah, I mean, and that is really none of the issues are new. And again, as somebody who's worked in the legislature, somebody who's run for governor, how much can the governor actually do to affect change on the issues that they're talking about? How do you work with the legislature? No matter who wins, the legislature in New Jersey is more Democrats than Republicans. The legislature is up for re-election. The Assembly is up for re-election this year. Democrats will most likely maintain control of the Senate and Assembly. So can you talk a little bit about the dynamics? And when as a voter, when you hear say, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z on day one, how much power does New Jersey's governor actually have to impact the day-to-day versus what the reality is and having to work with the legislature and seeing programs to fruition?
So New Jersey's governor is routinely called one of the most powerful state governors in the nation, but still not a king, still not a monarch, and everything the governor wants to do in order to address any of the issues that we heard in those sound bites is going to require legislative action. The legislature, regardless of how the election turns out in individual districts, will be Democratic in the next session, Democratic Assembly, Democratic Senate. And so Mikey Sherrill has a lot greater ability to make those policies real by working with members of her own party in the legislature. Ciattarelli is going to have to work across the aisle. He's going to have to convince Democrats who are going to be skeptical of what he's saying. A new school funding formula, does that mean underfunding districts that are getting money now so that some of the wealthier suburbs get more money? Is that what Jack is talking about? We don't know, but he'll have to convince the legislature that that's the way to go. So that'll be a tougher road for him.
Yeah. And, the issues affecting New Jerseyans, the cost of living, electric bills, those day-to-days. But immigration actually came up in the debate, and as did federal overreach. So Mikey Sherrill was really blasting Jack Ciattarelli for dodging questions on whether he's part of Trump's MAGA movement, especially after the White House froze $16 billion for that Gateway Rail Tunnel project. Ciattarelli focused more on New Jersey first. Trump has endorsed Ciattarelli. So can you talk a little bit about how the national issues are playing into this? Because we only have two gubernatorial races in the country this year, New Jersey and Virginia. So while the national issues aren't the day-to-day here, they are, well, let me ask you, do you think they are casting a shadow? If so, for the better, for worse? How is that factoring into the picture here?
I think the national political scene is casting a large shadow both over New Jersey and Virginia. And I think that voters are taking note of what's happening in Washington and deciding whether they want to replicate that in New Jersey. Just take the Gateway Tunnel. For the President of the United States to take money away from that project, it's probably the single biggest infrastructure project that will affect New Jersey in the next generation. And if it's not completed, commuters, businesses, families in New Jersey will suffer. And so if you're a voter in New Jersey and you see that's how Republican leadership treats New Jersey, you're going to have a really tough time supporting a Republican for governor in New Jersey.
Are there any issues that aren't being talked about in this race for governor? Again, because you have been a part of the legislature, especially when it comes to infrastructure in New Jersey, transportation, touching on that. Because again, a lot of people are so focused on right now, their energy costs have gone up, the school funding. Are there anything that the candidates aren't talking about, or perhaps just aren't getting enough play in the media that you think whoever wins, they're going to really have some issues. This is going to really take their attention that may not be being addressed right now.
Well, there are a lot of important issues. Let's talk about energy prices. New Jersey's prices are high because we have a shortage of power. There needs to be the construction of new baseload generating stations in New Jersey that will serve New Jersey. That's not being talked about. It should be. Our transportation trust fund is always something that is running on fumes. There has to be a long-term sustainable plan for the future to make sure that New Jersey's roads and rails, right? We underinvest in mass transit at our peril, that they are being funded to a very high degree in the future so that New Jersey commuters, New Jersey drivers, New Jersey families can get wherever they need to go without sitting in traffic. I think that's part of the livability aspect of the gubernatorial campaign that has to be addressed by the candidates.
Yeah, and some of these issues, again, are ongoing, and they're not going to have solutions no matter who wins. You're not going to be able to solve this in the next 4 years, in the next 8 years. To even kind of draw a parallel, looking at the State House renovations, right? Nobody really wanted to renovate the State House, right? So it kept getting pushed off, and then it took a really long time. And it's not fun to have to deal with that. Again, if you were in either of the candidates' shoes, looking at whoever's going to become New Jersey's next governor, is there some work that you would say this needs to be done right now? If not, it's going to be at the state's peril, whether it be, again, the transportation, investing in more solar and more other alternative energy sources. What do you think is maybe not necessarily something that is going to get votes right away, but it's like you got to lay that groundwork as opposed to focusing on some of the glitter?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of really important issues. We need to really seriously think about how we fund public education, relying mostly on municipal property taxes. We have a dual system of taxation that's not working. And I think the next governor has to sit down with the people of the state of New Jersey and have a real conversation about this isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time. Let's come up with a new way of funding our education and our governments by not relying on local property taxes. I also think that the affordability crisis in housing is a result of having 565 different municipalities with 565 different ways of getting land use approvals. That adds a lot of cost to the cost of that new apartment, that new townhome that young families want to go into. There are some solutions that are out there, but look, none of them are easy. All of them will require difficult conversations and choices that a leader has to say to the people of New Jersey that this is how we should go forward to make our tomorrows better.
All right, John Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.
Laura, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Good seeing you.
Hey, New Jersey, want to choose how you live as you age? Tune into AARP New Jersey's new show, The Power of Us, the show that celebrates aging with dignity, purpose, and joy. From protecting yourself against fraud, to staying healthy and aging in place, to finding purpose through volunteering, we've got the tools, tips, and stories to help you thrive. Join us on ONNJ and discover the power of us.
We vote to protect the Social Security we worked hard for. We vote because family caregivers deserve support. We vote to have a say in our future. For all the reasons why, AARP has information about when, where, and how to vote. Find the information you need to make your voice heard.
Welcome back to New Jersey Politics. Next to affordability, school funding is one of the most talked about topics in Trenton. Gerry Scharfenberger is a Republican representing New Jersey's 13th legislative district in the Assembly. He's here now to talk a little bit about a plan lawmakers are discussing and to try and tackle the topic. Assemblyman, welcome. It's good to see you.
Great to be here, Laura. Thank you.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about it. It's called the S2 funding formula, and it has a lot of disparities, with certain districts getting a lot of money, like places like Newark getting a lot of aid, while others are facing deep cuts of what's going on and some of the challenges lawmakers and school districts are facing right now.
Sure, Laura. And one of the things that we have a big problem with S2 and the whole funding formula as it stands now is it's not very clear how the funding is calculated. And I've asked this question several times at the budget hearings that we have every year when the Department of Education comes in, and I really haven't gotten a clear answer. And it's sort of a mystery to a lot of us legislators. But clearly, the problem is it's predicated upon the value of housing in property values in various towns, and that will affect how much aid you get. There's a cap been put on how much aid certain towns can get, yet there are some municipalities, some districts that are absolutely awash in money. So we're trying to get some parity and some fairness back into the formula. That's the ultimate goal here. But the way it stands now, we've had districts, over 150 districts, that saw massive cuts this year, resulting in massive tax increases to the residents.
Yeah. Well, years ago it was the Abbott versus Burke, the urban versus suburban schools, and the state Supreme Court talked about leveling the playing field. And ultimately, they found that necessarily putting money into some of the poorer performing districts, a lot of the urban centers, isn't necessarily translating into better grades, and that's what we ultimately want. So you look at a Newark school district, they're getting a lot of money, and they're spending a lot of money on things like museum, all types of other, money for catering. Yet the proficiency rates are not there. So what do you see as possible solutions? You don't want to take money away from, especially, disadvantaged students, but you want all students to have, education is that great equalizer. Do you believe that there's like some type of a Doge-style investigation that should be done into how money is not only given, but how it's being spent?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Newark gets $1.33 billion a year, which is enormous, way more than any other district in the state. And certainly you want them to have enough money to operate and give an adequate education. But the problem with this is a lot of times some of the problems with students underperforming in certain districts don't always have to do with funding. Maybe there are other factors, maybe parental involvement. Truancy rates are certainly above the state average. So these are things that don't necessarily translate into needing money or more funding, but need to be dealt with. And it's one of those things that Trenton has a terrible habit of throwing money at a problem, hoping something will get better without really thinking it through. So that's one thing right there. Some of the expenditures are just impossible to justify. $225,000 on balloons, of all things. You had mentioned catering, almost $3 million for catering for back to school night. These are things that certainly don't fit into the paradigm of school funding and school production. So I think a Doge look into the Newark school system, just to understand where everything's going, all of the expenditures are, whether they're legitimate or not. And I'm sure we would find enormous savings if we did that without interrupting or impacting negatively the education given to these young people.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what Republicans and what you are proposing to do. You have an Assembly bill that is called the Fully Funding Schools and Cutting Property Taxes Act. Can you talk a little bit about some solutions that you have? As again, we're trying to figure out what the root cause, what some of the root issues are, how it's being spent. But what are some alternatives that you'd like to see?
Well, one of the things, this is a bill that Minority Leader John DeMaio is the prime sponsor on, and I'm a co-sponsor along with many of my colleagues. And it's a really good bill that doesn't involve any more money. It's just apportioning the money that's already being spent more wisely and more fairly. And I think if we do that, if we took a look at where the expenditures are, where all this special aid or extra aid is that's going to a lot of these school districts that are underperforming and not really showing much improvement because of it, I think if we do that and dole out the money as needed, more so than just throw the money out there and hope things get better. So I think this bill would go a long way. It hasn't moved yet, but we're trying to get it moved. I think we have 30 co-sponsors just about on it. So it's a really, really strong bill, and it would allow local municipalities to cut their taxes. The local boards of education, that is, in the municipalities. So this is a win-win all around for the taxpayers and the students and the school districts.
Yeah, I mean, because so much of education is paid for at the local level. And again, what works well in one school district may not work well in another school district. And again, like you said, it isn't always money. You know, if you have students whose parents don't care and they're not showing up to school, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at that. If that student isn't able to physically get to school, doesn't have the support, you know, it is certainly, it's very complex and very layered. Governor Murphy has proposed a $20 million tax levy incentive aid program. And can you talk a little bit about that? It would kind of encourage towns to raise property taxes to meet their local share, but I'm not really clear on how that works with all of the caps that are out there. So can you talk a little bit about that plan, if you agree? Is it a Band-Aid solution, or are there other alternatives out there?
Quite frankly, I think it's a terrible solution. What it does is encourage local boards of education to raise taxes to close any funding gap they have in their budgets. And it allows them to circumvent the 2% cap, dangling a small amount of additional aid if they raise taxes locally. So the only people who are going to get hurt on this are the taxpayers. The money will come from them, and it'll close the gap, but the taxpayers will be on the hook for additional funding on top of it. So I am not a big fan of this bill and this program. And I know certain towns are being forced into doing it, but it's one of those things that is certainly not a long-term solution and a very damaging short-term solution.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you have, 299 districts that aren't receiving aid due to their high property values. Again, many are being forced to raise taxes or cut programs. So how does the state balance the needs of the districts with those that are receiving aid, you know, areas like Newark?
Well, in fairness, you want to look at the urban areas that may get this special aid or additional aid. Haven't seen any cuts the way some of the other areas, maybe the suburban or even the rural areas. So you have to take a look at the spending, what the money's being spent on. And I'm sure you could find huge savings if you did sort of a forensic analysis of where the money's going. They're getting, quite a bit of taxpayer funding from the state. So I think that's number one priority, is to really take a hard look, get in there by an independent source. Let them take a look at where this money's going. And, I'm sure we can come up with savings, and that savings can go out into the school districts that are really getting hurt. And I think that would be the balancing act that we need.
Yeah, just so final thoughts here on this segment. It's an election year. School funding is something that is always an issue. Can you just talk just a little bit about some of the shorter term as well as longer term programs you're looking at, whether it be, not just accountability in how schools are funded, but also giving families choice, whether it's school choice, and how Democrats and Republicans have to work together. You're in the minority as a Republican in Trenton.
Right. Well, that's a very good point. As I always point out, charter schools are very successful because they have the parental involvement and, the more motivated students in there. So you could use that as a model across the board, maybe additional charter schools to ease the crowding in some of the more general population schools. Certainly, I'm a big champion of school choice. I think that's very important. I think the money should follow the student. And I think that's an answer. The more choices that people have, parents have, I think the better for the student, the better for the educational outcome, and the better certainly better for the taxpayers. So these are things that are on the table and should be looked at. And I'm hoping after the election next year in the new session that we'll be able to get these things moving.
All right, Assemblyman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
Hey, New Jersey, want to choose how you live as you age? Tune into AARP New Jersey's new show, The Power of Us, the show that celebrates aging with dignity, purpose, and joy. From protecting yourself against fraud, to staying healthy and aging in place, to finding purpose through volunteering, we've got the tools, tips, and stories to help you thrive. Join us on ONNJ and discover the power of us.
We vote to protect the Social Security we worked hard for. We vote because family caregivers deserve support. We vote to have a say in our future. For all the reasons why, AARP has information about when, where, and how to vote. Find the information you need to make your voice heard.